Alright, so if you play video games, you probably know what turn-based combat is. You either have two groups of fighters on opposing sides of the screen, or maybe a grid-based map in which all characters involved take turns performing various actions like attacking enemies, supporting their allies, or throwing balls at magical animals. Or just, straight up building a tower out of people, because, why the fuck not? The whole point of this gameplay format is usually to enable the player to take their time to plan out their strategy instead of worrying about things like reaction times, techniques, or just mindlessly bashing the A button. You know what you did, Kingdom Hearts 3. Pretty much all you had to do in that game was just spam the shit out of spells. And then once you ran out of MP, you just spam the A button and do whatever kind of crazy attraction flow shit the game wants you to do. But anyways, in turn-based combat, planning is key. You have to adapt your actions to whatever strategies your enemies might be employing, and just in general, overcome what kind of numbers game that awaits you. Because really, that's all that turn-based combat boils down to in most cases. A numbers game. Either you do more numbers and win the fight, or the enemy pulls out some kind of bullshit win condition and you're just like, what? How? What? How would you even deal with that? So let's take a closer look at turn-based combat, and it's probably best to start simple. And how more simple could you possibly get than a game like Paper Mario? Straight from the get-go, Mario does what he does best. Jumping on people. In the opening tutorial fight where Bowser is once again trying to snatch a girl and faces off with Mario, Mario starts jumping. And Bowser starts slashing at him, and they just go back and forth, one after the other, constantly doing 1 point of damage to each other. The game starts off with very low and simple numbers, and honestly the whole game, for the most part, doesn't even go over single digits. At least when it comes to dealing damage anyway. The game starts off pretty simple. We were pretty much only able to jump on people. That's how you defeat enemies. But, of course, naturally, as you progress, you gain allies to fight with you in battle. You get your hammer, you get badges to equip various abilities, and yada yada yada. But what does the progression actually look like, and how does that translate into actual combat? Probably one of the most staple thing in turn-based RPG games is leveling up. Everybody does it. And for Mario specifically, every time he levels up, he gets to choose what he wants to upgrade, how he wants to progress. He can level up his health, making him able to take more damage, or he can upgrade his flower points, which is basically his resource for using special skills, or obviously the best one, badge points. So, what are badges? Well, given you have enough badge points, badges basically act as equipable items that give you access to new abilities, certain passives, or just straight up stat boosts. A good example of this is the Quake Hammer badge, a badge that gives you the ability to use a hammer attack that hits all ground-based enemies, which is pretty goddamn strong early in the game. Badges can also do a bunch of other neat stuff like reduce all damage you take by 1, or maybe electrify enemies that attack you with 1 point of damage. And there's even some flavor badges that don't cost any badge points to use, but they add a nice little goofy sound effect to your attack. I mean, hell, even if you funnel all of your level ups into badge points and later say, well shit, I wish I got more HP or flower points or whatever, there are badges for that too. They can straight up increase your health or flower points by 5, and mind you, everything in this game is pretty linear, so it's very easy to just jump back and forth between options, given the circumstances. Basically, badges offer a lot of options for growth for Mario and enable you to pick various forms of strategy for how you want to tackle battles. The user interface for Paper Mario is also both very clear and concise. You always know what kind of attacks you're doing, what the effects of those attacks are, and usually what the effects of the enemy attacks are. And not only that, but the game also includes some sort of involvement with mechanical skill. Pretty early in the game, you get something called action commands, which, if you jump on an enemy and time the A button just right, you get to jump on them again. It's a very simple and straightforward way of getting the player involved in turn-based combat while it's actually happening. Some action commands are harder to pull off than others, but for the most part, it's usually there for the benefit of the player. The game is ultimately very easy to get into while also having a lot of depth for those who want to get into the nitty-gritty of the mechanics. So where do we go from here? Normally this is the part of the video where maybe I bring up some examples of games that have less than preferable forms of turn-based combat. But that's the thing. Usually this kind of stuff is pretty subjective, meaning some people may like certain mechanics while others think they're straight up dog shit. So instead of focus on one specific game and just complain about various problems with it, I'm going to be looking at a broader spectrum of problems in turn-based combat games in general. And part of the reason I made this video is because I just recently started playing the Nintendo Switch port of Final Fantasy X HD. I've never played the game before, and it's pretty much the first mainline game I've played since Final Fantasy IX, back when I was like 11. Just a real quick side note, I'm sure people have their own preferences and all that crap, but I really feel that extremely long RPGs like Final Fantasy games are just best played on a portable console. Sure, you may not be getting the best possible presentation or audio or whatever compared to your comfy decked out living room with an HD TV and all that crap, but nothing beats taking a very long game on the go wherever you want. Too lazy to get out of bed? Grab your Switch. Gotta get on the train for a long ride to school? Grab your Switch. Or maybe you're just having one of those really rare situations where you just have to take a very long and arduous shit. All you gotta do is just grab your Switch, and at least you won't be bored during that time. But anyway, back to what I was saying about Final Fantasy. While I'm not going to get into the super confusing opening of the game where just absolutely nothing makes sense, or the extremely tedious and annoying blitzball segments, I will be talking about the turn-based combat, and how it really made me not miss some of the older designs of older games like this. The HD remaster of the game provides a nice facelift not only to the visuals, but some of the game's mechanics as well. One of the earliest changes in the game provides an option to shorten the summon cinematics. If anyone remembers the summons from the older Final Fantasy games like Knights of the Round, or just long skills in general like Sephiroth's Supernova attack, they know that shit can last goddamn forever. Sure, it might be cool to see the first time around, but eventually that stuff just becomes a straight up black hole of your time. But one of the things that older Final Fantasy games sort of relied on during their battles is having some sort of cinematic feel to them, sometimes forcing engaging combat into the sidelines. In one of the earliest boss fights in the game, your party encounters Sin while crossing the ocean, and as usual, he starts fucking shit up. So, Sin sends a bunch of minions to fight Titus and Waka, I don't really care if I'm pronouncing those names correctly, while some of the sailors on the boat manage to harpoon Sin's dorsal fin or whatever. So basically for this boss fight, in order to win you have to keep attacking Sin's fin while staying alive from the minions' attacks. Sounds pretty cool, right? You're right, it is pretty cool. It's also boring as shit. A lot of the battles in the Final Fantasy games of this era, the era being the late PS1, early PS2 era, often let the actual game mechanics take a back seat, and instead sort of play out like interactive movies. Mind you, this fight is like 3 hours into the game, and at this point you've barely even touched the sphere grid, which is basically Final Fantasy X's form of progression. So it really just feels like you're sort of just going through the motions instead of actually just playing a game. It's like you're interacting with a movie. You probably didn't pay $60 the last time you went to the movies. Although, I guess Endgame just came out, so that could be kind of debatable, but whatever. Another weird mechanic I think games can have is the ATB system, or the Active Time Battle System. A lot of popular games like Chrono Trigger, Child of Light, and other various Final Fantasy games have this mechanic. And the purpose of this mechanic is basically just to give the flow of time more meaning, trying to push players towards making quick-witted decisions and timing certain attacks correctly, as maybe certain enemies only have a window of opportunity to attack them. Likewise, if you're falling behind in an encounter and you're struggling to make decisions on what to do, time works against you. However, I feel a system like this is sort of counterintuitive for turn-based games where the whole point is having the time to strategize and plan ahead. While every game has a different take on the ATB system, there's only a few that, in my opinion, utilize it correctly. A good example of this is a game called Okage, the Shadow King. The ATB system works differently here, in that when an ally's action bar is full, time freezes. This time freeze doesn't necessarily stop the flow of battle, as any action that is currently being enacted cannot be stopped, but if you see an enemy about to hit one of your low health characters, you can plan on a way to heal them after that attack has taken effect. In this way, it's sort of like having the best of both worlds. You still get to have your real-time ATB combat where all characters are attacking each other in real time, but you still also have to have the benefit of being able to properly plan things out. Alright, so let's get into two series that I feel have turn-based combat pretty much perfected. These two series are the Bravely series and the Etrian Odyssey series. The first series, the Bravely series, does two things that make it shine brighter than other similar games. First, it offers a unique way to experiment with taking turns through the Brave and Default system, allowing both allies and enemies to either defend or save their actions for a later turn, or just consume a bunch of turns all at once. This allows for some extreme depth in strategy, as you have to time your attacks and be wary of your enemies taking advantage of the situation as well. The second thing it does right is progression. Sure, the generic equipment upgrades are still a staple in this game, but the real meat and bones comes from a diverse selection of jobs that can be swapped in and out at any time for as much experimentation as you could possibly want. This is important because not only are all the skills and abilities clearly defined through the user interface, but even the game goes through great lengths to keep you informed of everything that is going on. You always know about status ailments, buffs, debuffs, special effects, because of the various icons and text on the screen, and that goes for both your team and the enemy as well. This is one of the best possible components of turn-based combat done right, keeping the player informed in a concise and clearly understandable manner so they can make an educated decision on how to proceed forward. The Bravely series borrows a great deal from the Final Fantasy series, therefore it is pretty reasonably well known amongst RPG players, and that familiarity helps the series thrive. However, another game I wanted to talk about is perhaps the pinnacle of what turn-based combat should look like, despite it being one of the lesser-known series produced by Atlas. I know everyone is going to groan when I make this reference, but Etrian Odyssey is basically the Dark Souls of turn-based combat RPGs. It's the get good or go home game that expects you to employ everything at your disposal to turn the tides of battle and achieve victory. The games are actually so hard that after the first 3 games in this series, they started to pump in new ways to lower the difficulty of subsequent games. That being said, playing on Expert is pretty much like playing the game as it was intended to be played, and the developers do as much as they can to make sure you're aptly prepared for each journey in the battle. Similar to the Bravely series, there's a lot of information at your disposal for each encounter. Every single enemy in the game, bosses included, have distinct strengths and weaknesses. If you've beaten an enemy before or use an item to analyze it, you'll see its stats. This means you'll be able to see what kind of skills it has, what kind of attacks are good at damaging it, and what kind of crowd control it's susceptible to. In most RPGs, status effects and things like debuffs mostly work against the player, and bosses get to run around willy-nilly completely immune to such things. However, in Etrian Odyssey, it is expected for you to use these things to scrape by every single encounter, as they are intended to straight up blow your ass right open in any given opportunity. Even the mini-bosses, referred to as foes in this game, are easy ways to get a game over. Unlike other games which want to engross you in a story and make memorable moments with likable characters, Etrian Odyssey only wants to rock your balls and make you truly appreciate overcoming a harrowing encounter. It's a game that focuses strictly on the game's mechanics and polishes those mechanics to the best they can possibly be. I guess the point I'm trying to make here by making this video is that if you include certain elements in your game that involve relatively niche mechanics like turn-based combat, you should really try to make sure that they are as engaging and strategic as they need to be. Paper Mario was as successful as it was not only because it was super charming and hilarious, but because it implemented a form of turn-based combat that was extremely easy to get into and enjoyable. Etrian Odyssey, by comparison, isn't that easy to get into, but both games succeed in really making their turn-based combat into something that makes their games stand out, rather than just be an interactive tool for moving along the story. Alright, that's pretty much it for this video. If you made it this far, then you are a swell son of a gun for listening to my incoherent rambling. This is pretty much my first YouTube video that I've ever made, and I know it's not really that good, especially compared to, the big name YouTubers who have super fancy editing skills and they really know what they're doing, but I just sort of felt like trying my hand at running a YouTube channel and seeing how I like it. Doing the whole video business. Hopefully my attempts at being funny weren't too cringy and my commentary about the topic at least made some sense. from here on out, I might upload some more casual video game footage of me playing stuff that I've been into lately, and my next probably scripted video will probably be something like a top 10 RPG games that I've played. I made this video using Audacity and Shortcut. If you know any advice you could possibly give me on how to make my videos better, I would very much appreciate it. And once again, thank you for watching.